All right, so this is me and Carson Moore's presentation on morals and ethics and research focus on gambling and sports. So our first example we have is a referee. He was in the NBA reffing from 1994 to 2007, and he was a well-respected referee at the time until the FBI conducted an investigation into him and sports betting. This ultimately led to the end of his career and did end up serving 15 months in federal prison. So Tim, he admitted to placing bets on NBA games that he officiated in and some that he didn't, which obviously you're not allowed to do, even if you're not involved in the game. And he was accused of making calls that would affect the point spread or certain scores, props, whatever there might have been. And he did plead guilty to wire fraud and transmitting wagering information across state lines to outside sources.
So the next example we have is Jonte Porter, and this happened last year, so it's very recent. And he gave his friend information about his health on March 20th against Sacramento. His friend placed an $80,000 parlay that would have paid 1.1 million, and it was on like less than points, rebounds, assists, three pointers, like basically all the stats. And he was a bench player, so he checked in and then he played 3 minutes. Obviously, didn't hit any of the stats, and then told his coach he didn't play well. But since he played in the game, all of the bets still went through. And I think it was on DraftKings, and they got very suspicious. So none of the payouts were paid out, and an investigation started against him. Eventually, they found that he was guilty, and he was banned for life for the NBA. And he was the first player ever. He himself also placed 13 bets on NBA games, but he used his friend's account obviously, so it wasn't his name. His bets range from 15 to 22,000, and he made about 20 grand off of his bets. The the bad part was he placed bets on his own team to lose, which obviously is like the worst thing you can do. And then he also did the same thing he did on March 20th on January 26th against the Lakers. And this was very odd because these two games, March 20th and January 26th, he was the most bet player out of any player. And this was very odd because he's a bench player and doesn't really play much. The next example we have is the 1919 Chicago White Sox, or also known as the Black Sox scandal. And this was 8 players were found guilty of throwing the 1919 World Series. The most notable player is Shoeless Joe Jackson, who's one of the best players, and all 8 players were banned from baseball for life. Many believe that Arnold Rothstein was behind it, and he was a very famous mob boss from New York in a very famous family. The main player that was in it was Chick Gandil, and he was a player that kind of set everything up and met with all the mob bosses, and they were rumored to be paid around 80 to 100,000. This did go to federal trial in 1921, and someone named Burns, who was on the team, testified that these 8 players did throw the World Series. They said that they threw the World Series because there's no players union and they couldn't move teams. So when you're on a team, you're stuck forever, and they didn't make that much money. And they were mad they couldn't make more money. And some of the players like were hesitant on it, so they would signal each other during the games to like make sure to miss the ball or do something bad. How this connects to the Benedictine hallmarks and the rule of Saint Benedict. So the CIT, the Catholic intellectual tradition, it is a partnership between faith and reason. Reason can be seen when asking questions, why should I place this bet when I'm a part of a game, which obviously is not right, and your faith could be compromised knowing you were doing the wrong thing. The rule is Saint Benedict is these examples of throwing sports games do not follow the way outlined in this document. The author says, be attentive to God's presence in the ordinary moments of life, also shaped by scripture and prayer. And when you're doing these acts by throwing games and making the games like be bad and have no integrity, you're not living by scripture or prayer. So you're not following these rules. And the last one is the Benedictine hallmarks. Out of the 10 of them, I thought these three stood out because one is stewardship. As professional athletes, you're supposed to be like like people that look up to, go in the community, do good things. And when you're rigging the games on the side, you're not following any of that because people like little kids look up to you. The next one I found is prayer. And when you're making these bad decisions like this, you're not talking to God or having good prayer. And the last one's conversation, because most of these people have probably bigger problems than rigging sports games, and they're not talking to their loved ones and trying to get through things or talking out a reasonable way to go through life.
And in conclusion, we basically just kind of sum it up with saying that all the examples we provided, all the players or teams that have been caught gambling in sports did not represent Catholic tradition and what Catholic tradition stands for, especially when you look at the 10 hallmarks and the conversation, prayer, stewardship, and there's just a lack of rule of the CIT and the partnership between faith and reason. And finally, we said that the rule of the Saint Benedict, which is to live your life, is definitely not followed by any of these examples from these teams and players and are not shaped by scripture and prayer. And then here we have our 6 citations that we use.